Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, dubious speculation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. It is, of course, quite an exciting day with Bitcoin up approximately 7%. And in this video, what I would like to do is try to discuss whether this move is in line with prior expectations or out of line with prior expectations. If the line that I just said sounds familiar to you, it is because I said the exact same thing in mid-July after we got the news that Ripple had won the lawsuit against the SEC. And on that day, we put out a video called Altcoins Bounce, right? And on that day, a lot of people were watching altcoins spike up. A lot of people were FOMOing into the altcoin market because a lot of them were just up like 20% in a day. But in this video, if you go watch it, we said that it is not out of line with expectations and that we suspected that the altcoin market would backtest the 20-week moving average. If you go back and look over here in June, we said, look, guys, there is a good chance that Bitcoin will bounce off the 20-week moving average, and in that bounce off the 20-week moving average will likely cause Total 3 to backtest its own 20-week moving average, right? So a relatively safer asset, Bitcoin, was more bullish than the altcoin market. Alts were already below the 20-week, so you can't bounce off the 20-week if you're already below it. Bitcoin bounces off the 20-week, leads to renewed interest in the market, and then it led to Total 3 backtesting the bull market support band, which was, we said, a likely scenario, right? This is a stochastic process. You should not expect it to play out in a monotonic fashion. And in fact, this came to pass. And in this video, we said that this could likely just be a wick above the 20-week. And it was, right? So this candle here in mid-July, that was nothing more than a wick. And we ended up closing the week back below the 20-week moving average. And since then, Total 3, or the altcoin market, is down from this high wick up here, is down about 11%. And that's including the fact that they've added, maybe $10 to $15 billion in market cap to the definition of Total 3. Because while Total 3 is only down 11%, most altcoins are down a lot more than that since that time frame. Just to give you an example, ADA from that wick that we talked about in that video is down about 25%. Polkadot from that time frame, right, from this time frame in mid-July, is down about 18%. Solana, I imagine, is down a very similar amount, maybe not 25%, or it's even down even more. It's down 32% since that wick. Avalanche, I imagine, is also down quite a bit since that wick, right? About 32, 33%. So we had this example where there was this court case news where Ripple won against the SEC. And on that day, XRP had a pretty massive move to the upside. But what do you notice about what eventually happened? The entirety of that move was faded, and we ended up going below where that move began. And it took about 1 month to retrace that move after we had that massive, that one day where XRP rallied, 73%, right? Now, go read the comment section of this video. It's quite interesting to read because, again, what you'll see happen is that people will assign this move here to a new narrative to explain why the altcoin market was bullish. And since then, as we just showed, most of these altcoins that people were following down 20 or 30% since then, even after the pump that we are experiencing at the current time, even after this pump, right? I mean, ADA is still down 25% since that day that we had that pump. Again, Polkadot is down how much? 18%. Solana since then is down 32%. Avalanche is down 33%. Litecoin since then is down 40%. And we said many times that June or July tends to mark the yearly high for Litecoin because it normally fades into the halving, right? We talked about this at length. I should have the lines drawn on the chart. Yeah, you can see here. Here's the chart we had. And we said, look, guys, Litecoin normally peaks before the halving. There's going to be this narrative that people are going to think that this time is different because of this SEC Ripple news, but it's likely going to play out the exact same way. And it has, right? Litecoin, it was a nice pump, topped out in June or July, just like it always does, and went down into its halving, just like it always has. But on that day, no one wanted to believe it, right? No one wanted to believe it. So now we have this news with, of course, Grayscale and the the spot and the SEC about the spot ETF, and of course it's good news, right? I mean, it's good news, and it's long term. Long term, we want to see crypto succeed. But in the same way that the news did not really impact XRP's price in a sustained way, it's back to just basically where it was. Why should we assume it'll necessarily be different with Bitcoin? Now, over the macro scale, I am much more bullish on Bitcoin than I am XRP. And I know me saying that is likely going to make some people upset, but that's just a fact. I'm not going to pretend I'm more bullish on something if I'm not. I mean, Bitcoin has stood the test of time. And by the way, the XRP Bitcoin valuation is, since really inception, since what, 2013? I mean, XRP has had some sizable pumps throughout these years, but since over here it's down, like 82% or so. It's near the some of these lows that it's been at, but it's still still well off of them at the current time. And so I can't help but think that what we are experiencing today is similar to what we experienced back then, where we get this news, the market rallies on the good news, and then a few weeks from now, everything just retraces the gains that it made, right? So the difference, though, is, if Bitcoin were to retrace these gains in a few weeks, the altcoin market could be even lower, because while Bitcoin has moved back up some, you can go look at ADA, for example, it's nowhere close to where it was back over here, right? Like, so from this high here in July, again, ADA is down 27%. We talked about Polkadot, Avalanche, Solana, and Litecoin as well. They're all down, a lot of them are down 20, 30, 40%. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is down not nearly as much, right? Not nearly as much. I mean, it is down, and the expectation was that it would go down, but it's not down nearly as much, right? It's only down about 12%. Sort of going in line with the idea that the altcoin market just gets wrecked in the pre-halving year as the Bitcoin dominance goes up. So one of the things that we mentioned, we've mentioned quite frequently, is that the path, if we are to see Bitcoin drop in the second half of the pre-halving year, which is my general expectation, and it still is, then it is a stochastic process, right? It doesn't just go straight down, and you should not assume that it's going to just go straight down. Just like we did not assume that Total 3 would go straight down, right? Again, the argument was that Total 3 would likely backtest its 20-week moving average on its path down to the lows. And it did backtest it. And then this past weekend, in the bull market support band video, we said, well, what could make Bitcoin backtest its own 20-week moving average, right? So think about this in sort of this fashion. When Bitcoin bounced here, it allowed the altcoin market to backtest its 20-week moving average, right? The altcoin market is further up the risk curve than Bitcoin. So Bitcoin was holding strong longer than the altcoin market. So a bounce by Bitcoin off the 20-week only led the altcoin market to backtest the 20-week. This past weekend in the bull market support band video, we said that a bounce by the S&P off of its 20-week moving average would likely allow Bitcoin to backtest its own 20-week moving average. In the same way that a bounce by Bitcoin off its 20-week a few months ago allowed Total 3 to backtest the 20-week moving average, right? So as you go further up the risk curve, you'll see things, they fall off their 20-week sooner. So that when the less risky assets bounce off the 20-week, those riskier assets can then get these rallies back up to it only to get rejected. And again, we are seeing a very similar thing play out, except instead of Bitcoin bouncing off the 20-week and allowing Total 3 to backtest the 20-week, we're seeing the S&P bounce off the 20-week, which potentially allows Bitcoin to backtest its own 20-week moving average. Again, you go further up the risk curve and you will see how the assets lose confidence earlier and earlier. Altcoins lost confidence long ago. Then as you get, as you go further down the risk curve, you get to Bitcoin, and then it lost its 20-week moving average here in August. The S&P might not lose it in August or September. Remember, one thing that I think a lot of people they don't necessarily think about is in 2019, it was this correction by the S&P in August and September that caused Bitcoin to fall below its bull market support band. And then Bitcoin was unable to get back above the 20-week moving average, even though the S&P went on to put in new highs, right? So the S&P went on to put in new highs, but unfortunately, this correction by the S&P was sufficient to knock Bitcoin below its bull market support band right here. And so that when Bitcoin went back up on an S&P rally, right? So let's go look at the week of October 21st. We see Bitcoin went up 16%. What was the S&P doing the week of October 21st, right? It was going up, right? It was in an uptrend, and it was breaking out to these new highs almost, right? It was about to put in new highs. And even with the S&P about to put in new highs, Bitcoin was unable to break back above its bull market support band in Q3 of the pre-halving year. So again, it's the correction by the S&P that leads Bitcoin below the bull market support band. So that whenever the S&P bounces in Q3 of the pre-election year, it typically leads to Bitcoin holding resistance at the 20-week moving average. When you zoom out, you will again remember that it is in Q3 of every pre-halving year that Bitcoin has lost support here at the 20-week moving average. Every single time. Right? All prior cycles, that's where it lost the 20-week moving average. And this time, I don't see any difference at this point. So again, people are coming out again and saying, well, now that this news is out, that means this time is different, and it's not going to follow the ghost of its prior pre-halving years. But they said the same thing a month ago as well, before we had the drop below it. How do we know that this move isn't the same thing as this move? Could it be? Could it just simply be that the S&P dropping back to these levels, back to the 20-week, was enough to just knock Bitcoin off of its bull market support band, and that whenever the S&P shows any sign of weakness in the future, Bitcoin will just drop again? Look at what happened closely here in 2019. So the S&P dropped, and then it got a little bit more of a drop here in September, okay, in late September. And again, it rallied for the rest of the year, and then Bitcoin faded for the rest of the year. So when I look at this, nothing has changed. It is still in line with prior expectations, and prior expectations specifically said that we would likely backtest the bull market support band at some point whenever the S&P likely bounces off of its 20-week moving average, that Bitcoin would likely backtest it, right? We said that many times. And so at this point, it is not out of line with prior expectations. Now, I suppose it would be fair to say, just like we did in this video over here, we sort of identified what it would take to be out of line with prior expectations, thus potentially making us shift our viewpoint. And in this video, what I said, and I'll say the same thing again here, I said that, well, if the altcoin market, if Total 3 starts to get multiple weekly closes back above the 20-week moving average, then I might be willing to shift my view. But as long as it's nothing more than a wick and we just go right back down, then the argument stays the same. And I'm glad that I said that because, again, a lot of these alts are down 20 to 30% since then. Even though we got a bounce today, they're still down 20 to 30%. So the people that were bullish on altcoins over here are now excited again because their altcoins are up a few percent, but they're still down 20 to 30% from where they were just a couple of months ago in mid-July. So you have to be careful with these narratives because the narratives sort of suck people back in, and then that narrative can, just sort of fade a couple months later and no one's talking about it anymore. So I would be careful because I do think there are some similarities between sort of the sentiment today on this news about the about Grayscale and their court case with the SEC and what we saw back with Ripple in the SEC. And again, when XRP rallied, only 1 month later, it had completely retraced all of those gains. Only 1 month later. Go look at the XRP chart, right? So this was that move. And then after that week, it then just spent the next month basically fading back down only to take out that prior low. What's interesting is that this is exactly what happened to Bitcoin in 2019. So if you look closely, you'll see in 2019, Bitcoin fell below the 20-week, rallied back up. It even got a wick above it, right? So don't be that surprised if we wick above it. It's possible. But then look what happened. It then just spent the next 4 weeks going lower. Exactly what XRP did after the news came out, right? So massive move up and then just fade it back down and take out this low. So let's draw the line across the chart, right? So this is where the news came out. And then what happened? What happened? 5 weeks later, we took out this low, right? So we took out that low. It was a lower low, and this news all of a sudden didn't make a difference at all. So now with Bitcoin, we look at it today and say, well, what if it just does the same thing? What if it gets a nice rally up and then just spends the next 4 weeks after it slowly fading? So right now, Bitcoin has not even gone above the 20-week moving average. So Bitcoin would have to go above about 28.3K. So it's possible that it does that, right? It's possible that we see it go above 28.3. If you look at it on the daily time frame, you can kind of see that it's right here between the 21-week EMA and the 20-week SMA. If you were to connect the dots here, you could argue that, it could even go all the way up to around $29,000 and still maintain the integrity of this downtrend, right? So I don't really see that it's really changed anything at this point. And in fact, if it's gonna go to 29K, perhaps either today or tomorrow would be the time to do it. Because in 2019, when we got this rally, you can see that once the rally began, it topped out after 2 days, right? It was a 2-day rally. And the rally took us all the way above, a wick above the 20-week moving average after the second day. And then after that, we then spent the next 4 to 5 weeks fading it, and we took out that low. So very similar move here, right? Bitcoin rallies up. I'm sure there was some news event. I don't remember what it was, but I'm sure that this move here was associated with some news event. Rallies up and then fades, and new low. XRP, news comes out, rallies up, and then fades. And it took out this prior low on this wick. Today, Bitcoin rallies up, right? It's rallied up. Could, still potentially room to go higher if it wants to. But what if it then just fades back down into September and puts in a lower low, right? That's more or less what happened last cycle. Remember, so if you were to go look at the year-to-date ROI of 2023 and compare it to the 2015-2019 average, this is right around the time we got a little bit of a move. And then what happened? It faded, and we dropped to a new lower low. So, and that occurred, right? This occurred in Q3, Q4. So I do think it is worthwhile for people to consider that is an outcome. That is at least a worthwhile, again, it's a worthwhile consideration. In the same way, again, like if you go read the comment section of the altcoin bounce video, a lot of people were saying that this changes everything, and that the narrative has fundamentally changed the market, and that the liquidity stuff doesn't matter. And then again, we just saw the altcoin market take out all those gains and go lower. So you have to be careful with the narratives, because every price movement will have a narrative assigned to it, every single one. And then you wait a few more weeks or a couple more months, and then that narrative is being swept under the rug and no one cares about it anymore, and they're searching for the next narrative to talk about. So, I still think that this is within the context of prior expectations. I know some people might feel that that is not a fair assessment, but, normally after you go below the bull market support band, you would expect to back test it at some point, right? I mean, that's exactly what has happened, in 2019 as well, right? You go below it, you consolidate for a bit, and then you back test it just to kind of see what's what and who's who. Happens a lot, right? Even after 2018, right? You go below it, you then go back up, sort of back test it, fell below. Over here, right? 2021. You go below it, you back test it. Something interesting about these odd years, right? You have 2023 goes below back test. 2019 go below back test. 2017 below it, back test. 2023, perhaps the same thing, right? You go below it, and then you go back up and you back test it. So I will remain firm on my view here that we spent about half the year going up and half the year going down. I have previously said that price action in 2023, in my opinion, will likely be contained to within 12K to 35K. Meaning I don't think that the price of Bitcoin will go outside of those bounds in 2023. I don't think it'll go lower than 12K. And again, there's not even a chance that it even goes to 15 or 16K. Like there's a chance that it might not even make it there. But I think that it'll stay above 12K and below 35K for this year. I also think there's a decent chance that the yearly high is already in, as I've made clear, that we spend about half the year going up and half the year going down, right? So you go up and you go down. There's something interesting I'd like to talk about, because, we've had a few different theses we've talked about this year. And I want to talk about them because on any given day, it feels like one is not panning out. But then you look at the macro trend and it's like, oh, it is panning out. So one of those is Bitcoin dominance, right? This is one. We've said that dominance is likely in a rally in 2023, and no one's going to believe it, right? People are going to fade it every step of the way. Every step of the way, they're going to fade the Bitcoin dominance rally. And there's certainly been times where it feels like the dominance is going down and that the altcoin market is reclaiming, victory against Bitcoin. But look at the 2023 trend of Bitcoin dominance. Look at the trend, right? This is just up. These are all higher lows and higher highs. Some people say, well, why do you focus on Bitcoin dominance so much? Why don't you focus on Bitcoin USD? Well, because my expectation in the pre-halving year is that Bitcoin goes up and Bitcoin goes down. But my expectation for Bitcoin dominance is that it just mainly goes up, right? So I expect Bitcoin USD to go up and then down, right? Could be a higher low, could be a double bottom, could be a lower low. But I expect Bitcoin dominance to go up no matter what. So I'm more bullish on the dominance than I am the price. So if I had to hold any crypto, it makes sense to hold Bitcoin over anything else, because I think the dominance goes up regardless. So, Bitcoin gives you the exposure to the asset class that you want, so that on days like today, you're not pulling your hair out, freaking out about the price because you have no exposure. But if Bitcoin goes down, then the altcoin market still likely bleeds against it. So this is one thesis, right, that we've had, where we say Bitcoin dominance is likely going up this year. And I think from 40% to 60%. I've been clear about that for a long time, that I think dominance is going to 60%. The receipts are there. That's what I think. I think it's going to around 60%, and it could do so. It's possible that it could do so by the end of the year. Even though I know a lot of people are not going to believe that, and I could be wrong, but that's my view. Dominance, I think, is going up. One way to sort of view this as well, and I think this is an interesting way to look at it, is to look at dominance. Let's go dominance I guess dominance with stablecoins or dominance without. Let's just go dominance without stablecoins because that's ultimately what matters when you think about alt Bitcoin pairs. This is the year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin dominance in 2023. There are people that have faded this entire move and act like the altcoin market is strong. Dominance is going up. You know how we compare 2015, the average of 2015 and 2019 to 2023? What do you think it looks like to compare dominance average 2015 and 2019 to 2023? That's the chart. This orange line is the average year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin dominance in 2015 and 2019 compared to 2023. And you can see right now that we're looking at it's currently at about 1.14x. By the end of the year, the average of this could be at 1.25x, right? So, potentially another 10% move, which would get dominance to 60% approximately, right? If we see it sort of double up on what it's done, right? So, I mean, if you think about, and you got to be careful when you talk about percentages about something that is a percent, right? But just to think about it, if this is half of the move, right? So to go from 1 to like 1.13, 1.14, that's maybe about half the move, a little over half to get to then 1.25, there still is a significant amount of room to move up here if it wants to continue to follow this trend. And I've said over and over that I think dominance is going to go up for the duration of this year. And I think that, there's a good chance that by the end of the year, we are around 60%. And I still think that's the case. If you were to look at just some of these other metrics, remember, on lower time frames, it can feel like the theory is wrong. But then longer time frames, this dominance theory has been playing out, right? It's following the prior trend, and people are fading it every step of the way. Just like the view was that altcoins would likely go down against Bitcoin no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD, which has happened. Go look at this chart. Go look at total 3 minus USDT divided by Bitcoin. And look at where 2023 started. Right here. Alt Bitcoin pairs have dropped, no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. Bitcoin's been all over the place this year. It's mostly gone up, admittedly, but that's part of the theory, is that Bitcoin goes up for half the year, and then it goes down for half the year. So Bitcoin dominance went up while Bitcoin went up, and then the expectation is that if Bitcoin drops in the second half of the year, then Bitcoin dominance still goes up. And look at this chart. Alts are getting rejected right off the 20-week moving average, just where they got rejected last time. So, I look at this and I say, well, on any given day, the dominance is doing whatever it wants to do, right? Some days it goes down and people are dunking on Bitcoin dominance, but it's still generally trending up. All Bitcoin pairs, for the most part, have gone down, right? I mean, since January of 2023 started, all Bitcoin pairs are down about 37%. But you wouldn't necessarily know that by looking at all the alt season calls, right? I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know it from that, but they are still down 37%. So the theory, dominance of Bitcoin goes up in 2023. Another theory, altcoins get wrecked no matter the direction of Bitcoin USD. It's worked so far. A lot of these alts are just down at their prior lows. AVAX just put in new lows this past week. Another theory that I get flack for, Ether Bitcoin is dropping. This is one that is interesting because it's been dropping since the merge, right? Just lower highs and lower lows. I mean, yeah, any given day it goes up or down, but the macro trend has been down. What I find interesting is there's several different theories in play here, right? So it's Bitcoin goes up for half the year and Bitcoin goes down for half the year. Bitcoin dominance goes up for the whole year. Ether Bitcoin bleeds for the whole year. And and alts get wrecked no matter what, right? Those are the main theories that we have. That when Bitcoin bounces off the 20-week, altcoins back test the 20-week. When the S&P bounces off the 20-week, Bitcoin back tests its own 20-week. But what's fascinating is that any given week where the market is moving like this, it feels like these theories are not panning out, right? It certainly feels like it. But when you take a step back, the dominance of Bitcoin still going higher. Ether Bitcoin is still going lower. Alt Bitcoin pairs are still getting wrecked. Bitcoin USD still potentially up for half the year and down for half the year. That hasn't been disproven yet. Still potentially just a back test of the bull market support band, only to get rejected, just like it did in 2019. The other expectation that we had this year was that the S&P would get a seasonal correction in August or September of the pre-election year, right? So if you were to go look at major indices, the S&P 500, one of the things we said was that we're going to likely get this seasonal correction by the S&P, and that it should be sufficient to knock Bitcoin off its 20-week moving average, even if the S&P turns around in Q4 and puts in new highs. Even if the S&P goes and puts in new highs in Q4, the argument was that the correction, the seasonal correction by the S&P, will likely be sufficient to knock Bitcoin below its bull market support band. And when it does that in Q3, the pre-halving year, Bitcoin tends to spend most of its time below the 20-week SMA until the halving year. Okay, so a lot of these theories have actually panned out. But on any given day, it feels like, while one of them might be panning out, it feels like another one's falling apart. So remember, you can have theories and a thesis about the way the market's going to move. It doesn't mean it's going to move that direction on that day, right? It could be, it's a long process. So I would encourage you to always zoom out and see what the macro trend is. The thesis is that dominance goes up and dominance is going up. The thesis is that Ether Bitcoin goes down and Ether Bitcoin goes down. The thesis is that Bitcoin USD spends half the year going up and half the year going down. And so far, that has panned out. The thesis is that the seasonal correction by the S&P in Q3 will be sufficient to knock Bitcoin below its 20-week SMA and knock it into a downtrend for the rest of the year. So far, that is panning out. Okay? So far, all this has panned out. The question to really figure out now is this time different, right? Are the narratives true that this time is different and that Bitcoin will, get above its 20-week SMA and hold it as support going into Q4 of the pre-halving year? Will it be different? I doubt it. But in order to invalidate, the theory, the thesis that we have right now, I would say I would need to see multiple weekly closes back above the 20-week moving average. If you get that, then you start talking about sort of changing the outlook on it. But as long as it's doing the same thing that it did last cycle, and the cycle before that, and the cycle before that, I don't know that it's necessarily worthwhile. Another thing to consider too, by the way, is this move on this day so far is about a 7% move. The rally that we got in 2019, it was even more nail biting, right? I mean, it was like this rally here, this day, this was a 16.5% move in one day. Bitcoin also went up 4x, but it was a 16.5% move in one day. And it still ended up rolling over and putting in a lower low in Q4. So my view has not changed. I know a lot of people are sort of look at these types of moves and say, well, perhaps this time is different and it's not going to follow what it did previously. And as I said in the altcoin bounce video, as I said back then, these people could be right. They could be, okay? Markets can surprise us, and there are times where it deviates from what we've historically seen. But at this point, I think having a cooler head has paid off. I think that assuming altcoins bleed has paid off. I think assuming Ether Bitcoin goes down and Bitcoin dominance goes up has paid off. And we'll see if sort of the last theory of it plays out. And that theory is that Bitcoin USD goes down and for the second half of the year, and the dominance still goes up. That's sort of the last thing to check, right, out of all these different theses that we've had. That's sort of the last thing to check. And that has not yet panned out, right? We got the seasonal correction, but until we put in a lower low, until we take out, let's say 25K, until we go to 22K or 23K, then we can't even say that that has panned out. There's another chart I think it's worthwhile to take a look at, and it's this altcoin season index chart. So this is the 90-day ROI time frame, a 30-day SMA of the altcoin season index on the 90-day ROI time frame. So look at this chart, how we went deep into Bitcoin season. We went into Bitcoin season while Bitcoin went up. And then you can see this is starting to roll back over. So the question is do we go deep into Bitcoin season again as Bitcoin goes down? You might say, well, Ben, Bitcoin's going up today. Again, guys, it's not a daily theory. It's a macro theory, right? So if Bitcoin USD just sort of comes up here only to fade back down and do something like this, like that still is Bitcoin going down. There's plenty of time over here where Bitcoin was going down, but the general direction was still up. So there could still be over here, there could be plenty of time where Bitcoin's going up, but perhaps the general direction will still be down. That theory still needs to be fully tested. But I still think that, when you zoom out, the macro trends do more or less still seem intact. And my expectation is that they will likely continue to remain intact. And hopefully I've provided the invalidation, sort of criteria to sort of start talking about it moving in a different direction than what it has done previously. And just to reiterate, I would need to see Bitcoin back above its 20-week in a sustained way. Not just a wick. 2019, it was just a wick. Total 3 a few weeks ago, right? If you go look at Total 3 a few weeks ago, if I can find it, it was just a wick. So get the wicks out of here. I don't care about the wicks. You need to get weekly closes back above. And if you don't get that, then I think there still is this argument that it's playing out how it historically has. So that's where I stand. I just wanted to come out and address this move, as it happened, rather than not address it at all. I'd like to think that even 2 days ago, we said, we're likely going to backtest the 20-week SMA whenever the S&P bounces off of its bull market support band. It seems like the S&P is getting that bounce now. Bitcoin's backtesting the 20-week moving average. We'll wait to see what comes next. Do remember that there is some unfavorable seasonality coming for the Cryptoverse in September. Historically, Bitcoin does drop in September. The average drop is about 7%. And so, I don't know where Bitcoin's going to close the month of August. If it closes it at this price, a 7% drop only gets you down to 25 or 26K. If Bitcoin drops what it did last cycle in September, which was 14%. I mean, you can see, so in 2019 in August, Bitcoin dropped 4.5%. Right now in August, Bitcoin's down about 4.5%. So if Bitcoin closes the month down about 4.5% and then it goes down 14% next month, a 14% drop from the current price gets Bitcoin down to about $23,000 to $24,000. One reason that might be a little bit, somewhat relevant is that when you look at these monthly candles on Bitcoin, there's at least some support, right? Monthly support at 23K. So if September gets a massive move to the downside to the tune of 14%, that gets you back down to this 22 to 24K level. I mean, it's really right at 23.1K. I also, now that I'm thinking about it, I also wanted to talk about a couple other charts I've seen make their way through the Cryptoverse. One of them is the MACD, so the moving average convergence divergence. There's been a lot of people talking about this one recently and how it's recently crossed over to green in July. Just as a reminder, and I wish I didn't have to be the one to always provide sort of the more negative view or the more bearish view, but I just see everyone interprets these charts as always being bullish. And I remember I fell for that idea in 2019, right? Where, just because it's green doesn't mean it's necessarily going to go put in a new high, right? Like in 2019, when this flipped green, it actually marked the yearly high, right? So the MACD on the monthly flipped green in June of 2019, and it marked the yearly high. It marked the yearly high. This flipped green in July. And so far, that marks the yearly high. So again, I mean, everyone's going to talk about why it's bullish, but it wasn't bullish in 2019 when it flipped. right? We spent the next 9 months bleeding. So we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. But I just wanted to sort of talk about that because I did see that chart making its way through the Cryptoverse over the last couple of weeks, and I just remembered it from 2019, and remember people talking about the monthly MACD had flipped bullish in June of 2019, and why that was a good thing, and then we ended up just fading for the rest of the year. So do consider that. Also note that some of these candles over here, once Bitcoin sort of flipped over here in 2019, we had pretty large wicks on either side, right? I mean, pretty large wicks here. You could easily see something similar over here where it just sort of slowly fades back down. This could be the sort of the slow fade to 23K, right? It's like you could think about it as, maybe a slow fade down to 23K. Maybe you hang out in that area for a while, and then you finally figure out if it's a higher low, a double bottom, or a lower low sometime in a recession, maybe in early 2024. Anyways, we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully this has been informative. And I do hope you enjoy the content, even though I know the price action on any given day is quite volatile, and it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen. But hopefully these videos are useful to you guys. I'll wrap it up there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.